Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, which is an update on economic recovery in Waterloo Region, presented by Waterloo EDC and the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. My name is Allison Mitchell, and I'm part of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce team. Before we begin our webinar today, there are a few housekeeping items that I'd like to share. Your microphones should be muted, but please ensure that they are to reduce background noise. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar, and you can do so by typing them into the questions box in your control panel. Our presenter will be answering your questions at the end of the presentation. All webinar registrants will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to today's webinar recording. Our presenter today is Tony LaMantia, President and CEO of Waterloo EDC. A University of Waterloo alumnus, Tony has ties to the community for decades before helping to found Waterloo EDC as the organization's inaugural leader in 2016. A community leader at heart, he relishes the opportunity to work with businesses, civic leaders, governments, and organizations like Chambers of Commerce and the tech ecosystem, anchors to help to build a strong, sustainable economy for the people of Waterloo Region. Tony is currently the acting chair of the Business and Economic Support Team for Waterloo Region, the partnership created to advocate on behalf of the local business community during COVID-19. A passionate leader, his career has spanned the public, private, and nonprofit sectors with executive roles in investment, marketing, technology sales, and mining, as well as the province of Ontario, where he was Assistant Deputy Minister of Investment and Industry. We will also be joined today by the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Ian McLean, as well as Art Sinclair, who is our Vice President of Public Policy and Advocacy. I would now invite Tony to begin his presentation.
So thank you very much. It's very cool to be with an anchor partner like the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. It's always a pleasure to engage on a range of initiatives. So here we are. It's week 15 after standing up the Business and Economic Support team for Waterloo Region, and you go back to, what were we doing in our day jobs, and they've changed fairly dramatically. But, back in, the third week of March, a number of us, and this really started with some informal conversations between Ian, the guys at Communitech, some civic leaders, and the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. We felt that we needed a group to be a point of contact for governments as we were entering in this crisis to make rapid decisions to support economic and business conditions as they evolved, right? And we thought that it was important to properly and promptly, like speed is important, disseminate these decisions to the business community. And we also felt that while this was happening in real time, that we would advocate on behalf of Waterloo Region firms to ensure their needs and concerns were articulated and being addressed and met. And so, we stood this up relatively quickly, and we, the goal was to ensure that we were able to funnel up the concerns and ensure that we were informing firms in real time about programs that were required to support. And so here we are, week 15. And, in areas like government advocacy, industry advocacy, some of the workforce preparedness work going on in communications, the group has grown to about 84 active members. And, some of the things that we've been able to stand up included, kind of 4 letters to the Prime Minister and the Premier, a couple of op-eds. We've done a lot of one-on-one conversations in addition to radio interviews and media. The industry committee has been very active, with its subcommittees working with, over 1,400 companies to navigate, government support and local employment programs, trying to get those issues to filter up. The launch of the Waterloo Region Small Business Center Digital Main Street, and there was some news on that today that I'll touch on. Communitech's virtual job fair, the workforce committee, which did quite a bit of planning work at the front end, launched the findyourjob.ca portal and kind of doing a lot of great work. And then there's been a lot of communications at the same time. You know, one of the things that we felt would be really important was we didn't want this thing that we stood up to essentially change the existing contact points for businesses in the region. You know, the chambers, the BIAs, the tourism marketing organizations. We felt that it was important to continue to encourage firms in Waterloo region to reach out through their existing contacts with inquiries and needs, and that would filter up as best as we could stand it up. And now, you know, where are we today? So, you know, I think the most important thing is there are a number of things happening at once. You've got this community readiness, which indicates that Waterloo region is on the verge of, you know, opening up for, you know, phase 2. Facilities have to make sure they're ready. There needs to be employee readiness, and I think there also needs to be patron and customer readiness. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. But we're in this funky period where the emergency response benefit is slated to be wound up by July the 15th. I think that's the date. And then you've got programs like the wage subsidy and the rent programs and the loan programs as the remaining supports going forward. So the last bit of advocacy we did was really focused on the SMBs and what I would call kind of the concerns on Main Street. And so what we advocated for last week formally was to allow, certainly on the wage subsidy, to allow businesses that use a third-party payroll provider to access the program, to lower the revenue threshold to 15% from the current level. We also made it really clear that as businesses start to reopen during this period and that, you know, and start to generate revenues, that they not be cut off from the program before they get to break even. So that these were key things that we recommended on the wage subsidy. On the rent program, we've been calling for a while for allowing tenants to apply even if the landlord wouldn't, and that would allow access for at least part of the program for tenants. And obviously recently we heard about upcoming legislation from the province to restrict and or prohibit evictions on by landlords, you know, I think for a 3-month period. And we also, on the rent, we wanted the revenue thresholds to match or align with the wage subsidy, also at 15% at a loss level. And then we want clarity on what, you know, kind of what the provincial stance would be on this. And I think we're starting to get that as far as landlords and tenants. And on the loan programs, we just wanted to make sure that more business entities had access to the loan programs, including sole proprietors, businesses that have contract workforces, and that, you know, BDC and other financial institutions have some alignment and consistency on their loan guarantees and loan programs. So those were some of the things that we advocated for and are going to be really important over the next couple of weeks. And you know, and finally, like, we're on the verge of kind of reopening, and suddenly you know, kind of clarity on safety protocols becomes really important, right? And so you know, not just the dates for reopening, but kind of the how and like, you know, what are the physical safety measures, the PPE requirements, capacity limitations. We need clarity on that stuff. And so, you know, you get to like Wednesday of this week, and the region released reopening guidelines for restaurants and food services. So that's kind of a major step forward. And I talked about, while we have, you know, community readiness, facility readiness, and the importance of employee readiness and training, one of the gaps I think still is, you know, whether your patrons and customers are going to be ready, right? And then there's an education program that has to take place, because this is not going to work if, you know, people are coming into areas, whether it's a restaurant or a tourist facility, where physical distancing is a challenge and they don't have masks. So, you know, do you supply masks at the front end? What do you do with kids? And you know, are parents going to be able to, as patrons, be ready? So these are a bunch of things that we're dealing with in real time. make no mistake, we're kind of we're trying to plan and be prepared, but we're going to do some learning by doing here. And it's not just a Waterloo region thing that we've stood up. There is also a reimagining Toronto region framework that's going forward, being led by the Board of Trade. I'm on that steering cabinet working with Toronto, and there are a number of work tracks that include, retrofitting the urban region. What does the city and corridor look like for transportation? What are the recovery programs? Let's get back to trade and investment. Do we have to start kind of localizing supply chains? So all these things are kind of happening in real time. We heard today about the expansion of the Digital Main Street Initiative, which was created by the Toronto BIAs, supported by Google, Microsoft, Shopify, and the RAP, or the Recovery Actualization Program. So there's a number of programs designed specifically to help small businesses with virtualization and digitizing their businesses where possible, realizing full well that it's not going to be possible for some. And so we're stuck in this mud. We're trying to plow ahead, and from the standpoint of the partnership with chambers and with Communitech and all of the members of the business and economic support teams, the focus on recovery is going to require kind of preparedness, learning in real time, listening and promoting best practices. And essentially, as much as we'd all like to go back to our core businesses, those businesses have probably changed into a next normal, kind of welcome to what I call the emergence of the contact-free economy, right? Probably more government intervention, and suddenly, things like resilience and finding ways to emerge stronger become really important. And some tough decisions are going to be made by small firms about, can I make it in this environment? And we're all going to have to ask ourselves, what can I do about it? And that's kind of where I'll leave it off, because there's a number of initiatives underway. But it's been an exhilarating, challenging, frustrating kind of 15 weeks. And, kind of the sisters and brothers in this process that we've had have been tremendous, right? And so, working with Ian, the chambers, all of our partners, has been quite an eye-opener for me, and it's been humbling to be asked to drive this work forward. But it's far from done, and we've got to make sure the recovery plows ahead, because for many companies and for many jurisdictions, going back into a lockdown is a non-starter, right? So let's hope that our community will be ready and that we'll be successful. But we got some work to do. So I'm just going to leave it there, and
Well, thanks, Tony, and I'm going to build on it. I've got a couple of questions, and we'll see what comes in on the chat box, and Allison can facilitate that as those come in. But I echo. I mean, what I think your leadership of BESTWR, so Business Economic Support Team, is really, it didn't exist 10 weeks ago. It's we put it together, community partners from all over the region, and that's been really important to get that feedback around, because every sector's got their own challenges, whether it's retail, whether it's restaurants, hospitality, manufacturing. So maybe the first question I would say, and not specifics of the government programs themselves, other than to say you've identified, we've all the issues that you raised have come from business saying, here's how I'm being screened out, here's what I need to make sure I can apply for those supports. So we're working on those. I think maybe just as a general comment from you, government seems to be listening. They haven't got it perfect by any stretch, but they are listening to our organizations like us, our collective organizations. And I mean, your sense, are there changes? I believe changes are coming, but I'm interested for the rest of the group listening. Are there going to be changes on the wage subsidy? Are there going to be changes in the rent programs and the loans? Because we've heard a lot about it. I believe that that's coming. And that will mean that there's more support coming for us, particularly small, medium-sized business. But I'm just interested in your perspective of whether you know what's the timing you think that's coming at.
Well, there is some breaking news that I noticed on social media. I'm fairly active on it, and that is that from Morneau, and I hope I'm correct. I don't want to kind of get it wrong, but that they're not contemplating any major tweaks in the wage subsidy until August, right? Which I've got to find out more about, because that is a problem for me, and I think it's going to be a problem for Ian, for your members and for the BIAs, because we've been pretty clear about what Main Street needs, and kind of the digital Main Street initiative in and of itself is not going to solve the problems where there is an inability to kind of digitize or virtualize the operation, right? Especially if it's a tourism facility or a kind of a bed and breakfast or a restaurant. You can't virtually enjoy those things. It's those become a challenge. And so I hope I've gotten that wrong, but it seems to me that they're signaling that they're open to making more changes, that the changes are going to be kind of phased in. But the reality is that a number of companies in the sectors I just mentioned are going to be going into crisis right now at a time when it's their peak season. So we may have to sort of get on the blower, and if that's the case, just to say, explain to us why you feel it makes sense to wait until August, right?
So we'll keep banging away at that. I mean, one of the things I was on last week with the Ontario Legislative Committee, the Finance Committee, around issues in the hospitality, tourism, and restaurant sectors, because a lot of those, and people can imagine if you're in the tour business or Bingaman's or other places that are event oriented, this is their busy season and they're not open, and it's hard to imagine when that's going to happen. And those are the types of things we're taking in real time through the Best Waterloo groups, of saying, here are the challenges for specific sectors. And those are the types of things we're continuing to do in real time.
Yeah. So let's commit to anybody who's participating in this webinar that the recovery is far from assured if these measures are not modified to meet the demand, right? And especially for small and medium-sized businesses, and so we've got some work to do, and hopefully, look, the federal and provincial governments have been quite responsive. I believe that it's going to require a heightened sense of understanding that there is a digital divide, right? That those companies that can work from home and virtualize their businesses and their transactions, they're the haves, and those that can't are the have-nots in this environment. And it also breaks down in terms of kind of a range of things, including education and family income. And so this is a key moment. We're in a historic moment where the ability to pivot to support Main Street is going to be remembered for a long while. So we got to do everything we can to make sure that we shine a light on where the policy responses are not working well, right? So, I mean, having said that, you also have to look around the world and say to yourself, thank God this isn't Arizona or Texas or kind of the U.S. in general. But we have some work to do to improve kind of the outcomes for our small and medium-sized businesses.
One of the things, and then we'll see what comes in on the chat line, and Art will probably have a couple as well. One of the reasons I think we've gained some presence and some strength is that we are working together, and we are part of what we call the innovation corridor. So the Toronto to Waterloo economic zone, whether it's the next generation manufacturing, which is next generation manufacturing, whether it's connect the corridor of saying we have to connect with transit, our communities right along the corridor. Toronto, as you mentioned, my colleague Dan De Silva and the Reimagining Recovery, of which you and Ian Klugman are both on from our end of the corridor on that steering committee. And then Best Waterloo, because they're all sort of tied in together. We're doing it from the Best Waterloo as Waterloo region, but we are connected in this recovery, whether it's through supply chain or companies like Sun Life, Manulife, Shopify, Google, that have presence in both ends of the corridor. Maybe just connect how there's consistency between the work that's happening in Toronto here, because there's some common themes that government needs to hear about.
Yeah, so on that front, absolutely, there's a lot of consistency in much the same way as, you know, the tourism stakeholders have stood up their tourism task force, and the industry committees have set up one for manufacturing, for food, and for others. The corridor steering committee has stood up a number of working groups, and Ian, you sit on one that are very much focused on driving what's going to be required for a successful recovery, and it ranges from postcard projects like there's one right now on contact tracing that's going to be really important to reopening successfully, to things like a COVID safe certification for restaurants. I mean, what does that look like? And can you do that so that actually helps patrons? Because there's a big demand side of this too, right? We're going to have to feel comfortable getting out there and the expression trust but verify. You think you're going into a COVID safe facility, but it would be great to get some third-party validation like a COVID safe certification. So a bunch of work going on that front, focused on virtualization, focused on trade and investment. Our organization is looking at, as we kind of start to get back into our core business, looking for gaps in the local supply chain, whether it's for PPE or for manufacturing. Some of the great stories in the region, include companies like Eclipse Automation in Cambridge that is designing and manufacturing the first N95 masks. In fact, the first batch are off for NRC certification right now. That's a great story. They've got a ventilator that's ready to go. And so when you look at the supply chain that a company like Eclipse has, an organization like ours has to work with them to say, okay, where are you getting your materials from? What are the gaps? What are you importing? What can we set up locally, right? And it applies across a number of different sectors like manufacturing, right? So I think that these challenges and this opportunity really to rather than focusing on greenfield foreign direct investment, which is a tough space, and I'm really pleased that, like, I never would have taken the job as the inaugural CEO if our organization was strictly focused on that, like some other organizations are, in particular, Toronto Global and others, because most of our growth, most of our expansion, innovation, and kind of new markets will be driven from investments in and by existing companies in the region. So that's one area that I think the steering cabinet is going to really be focused on. There's going to be opportunity for other postcard projects, but I think that now is the time for, let's use the advantages we have. Like, unlike 1918, there was no internet. There wasn't kind of the ability to communicate so quickly. There wasn't kind of these wonderful virtual connections. So the BIAs, the tourism organizations, the small business organizations, the chamber movement, organizations like mine and our counterparts in Ottawa and across the country, we all got to work together. We've got to learn and kind of find out what's working, what isn't, and that's why it's important to be part of this Toronto Waterloo corridor partnership.
Now, maybe Art, I go to you. I mean, we're doing on our, and with the Cambridge Chamber, your staff as well, but Art is the front lines of our organization of hearing from members the challenges they're having in government programs, but also the advice around how to safely open up. Art, and you're on a couple, I think at least 2 committees of Best Waterloo. What are some of the issues that are top of mind for many of our listeners or our attendees today, but the threads that have come out of the Best Waterloo?
Well, there's a couple of things, Ian and Tony. I think one of the key issues is that there's a number of businesses that are saying, okay, I don't want speculation. I don't want innuendo. I just want, okay, if I'm going to open, here's what's going to be required of me. Because as one restaurant owner told us, look, I was ready to spend $30,000 until somebody told me, no, you don't need that. So, you know, Tony, what do you think overall in terms of the directions that's been provided to businesses and getting preparation for the recovery and the reopenings? You know, where are we? Can you see some areas where it could be better, or?
Well, I mean, you know, I got to be careful not to get kind of too high up there, you know, into the details, because the air is kind of thin for me. But I would say that, you know, areas like, you know, what is fundamentally what are the kind of PPE minimums, right? And so, yeah, we talk about kind of hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette and safety protocols for each of the facilities, but you know, what's the best practice and what's the law, right? And what are the regulations around kind of, can you mandate masks? So can I say to my patrons, you come in with your you know, with your children, you're going to have to wear masks because we're not going to be able to social distance. So real clarity on that, I think, is we're starting to get there, but I think that is something that you know, that can't be a learn by doing situation, because you know, the facilities themselves don't want to be kind of responsible or known for, you know, so and so ended up getting an infection when they went to this facility or this restaurant, because this is not a you know, blame doesn't help anybody here, right? So I think those types of protocols are important. And so the education piece, employee education in particular, is going to be required. Like, you know, the province has said, hey, you know, Waterloo region, you're going to be allowed to reopen. And, you know, our public health folks have said, okay, this is what we're going to need to do to make sure that our community's ready. And here are the best practices for facilities. And, you know, yesterday the region issued a reopening restaurant and food services guide, but there are guides for manufacturing. And so I think that, you know, this is all happening very fast. And man, I sure hope that companies have been preparing for this, because otherwise it's going to be, you know, cramming for the finals as you open up on Friday morning. That's never a great way to do it, right? So I think, you know, the clarity on the laws and the regulations, really important. And then what the facilities can do to educate not just their employees, but more importantly, their patrons and customers, because they want them back, right? They want them back in some format as we reopen. So I think those are areas where there's more work to be done, and it's mostly education and clarity.
Yeah.
One of the things, Tony, one of the things, Tony, that we're just we're about to launch in the next week or so, hopefully, or next number of days. A local company, Exonify, have been working with Charlotte, North Carolina, with the Board of Trade or their Chamber of Commerce and their community, to develop what Exonify does, which is training videos, short snippets for business and community about what they need to know to safely open. Allison is sort of our point person. I think our two chambers, Cambridge and KW, are going to sort of take a little bit of a leadership, but it's on behalf of the whole region for economic development, Communitech, and the municipalities. Maybe talk a little bit about the importance of that, because that's in real time. How do people get that information? And this is going to be one of those platforms where in real time, every day, there might be something new as new direction comes out from, as example, public health or from the province, that we have this mechanism here, which is a made in Waterloo solution with a great platform and technology from Exonify. I mean, is that what you're getting at, is of how do we get that information to right down to the grassroots, to the business owner, and we all can share that information? And then maybe Allison, you can go in with just a little bit of the detail of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I would say absolutely yes. And this is an example where you know, you're not getting what you're paying for. You're getting a lot more because it's free. And the Exonify platform is, you know, it's all about proven learning, you know, gamification of learning at work for employees. It's used by, you know, kind of the leading companies around the world, companies like J&J, that are really focused on operational excellence. And it's all about kind of getting your neural pathways, you know, kind of through gamification. I think there's a curling game. There are a number of other platforms that can be used, focused on, you know, how to safely reopen. And so, you know, if you are a company that is really wants to make sure that all of your employees are COVID safe, COVID ready, understand what the future is going to look like and how to safely reopen, being able to use this free platform is a great tool, right? Because if, you know, really, what are the options? There's one-on-one conversations, good luck with that. There's all kinds of links you could send people to, right? There are all kinds of resources in your organization and my organization have done, you know, our organization's done webinars, we have resource pages, but nothing like a kind of an online game focused on best practices that other jurisdictions have said, this really works. We're going to use it to drive everybody's employee readiness. And my hope is employees are also patrons and customers themselves. So what they're going to learn, they're going to take when they go to you know, the tourism kind of facility or event, whether it's a farmer's market or a restaurant or a bed and breakfast. So I think that's a really important platform. And the fact that you've got a local company that's got a globally significant platform allowing Waterloo region to take advantage of it, and that's being business led and business supported, is a beautiful thing in my view.
Allison, do you want to just give a brief overview, because there'll be more coming from all of our organizations as we get ready to launch that. But maybe Allison, if you can give a bit of just an overview of what's coming, so people know what to expect.
Sure, thanks, Ian. So we've been working hard on this platform for the last couple of weeks, and we're hoping that we can launch next week, but stay tuned for that. And basically, we really want this platform to have valuable information that employees of businesses can go in and get trained up on what they need to know for reopening. And Exonify has got a great repository of training modules already built, and so we're going to be using a lot of those in terms of reopening. So how to protect yourself and others from infection, and proper disposal of masks and gloves and proper hand washing, etc. And when we launch, all of those modules will be there, but we're also going to be updating this in real time. So, you know, as the need arises for different modules, we will be working with Exonify to add that information to the platform, as well as other resources like one-pagers and videos that might be of help.
And I think the important part of this, which I found appealing when Tony, you and I were on that first call with Carol Lehman from Exonify, is it's being made, it's free for everybody, for any business, chamber member or not, or any of our businesses will have access to this for them and their employees. It's short and small bite-sized chunks that doesn't take a long time, but is the information that people need. And I think it's going to be a real opportunity for us, because this isn't a short-term thing. I think you've highlighted that. So this reopening and kind of getting to the new normal, whatever that looks like, is, you know, 6 to 12 months anyway. So there's a period of time where we're going to need this type of platform to update all of the people listening and all of our members in real time. So it's a great opportunity.
And don't forget, it's proven, it works. So you've got a proven platform, you know, based on how people learn, that you know, our companies and you know, employees can take advantage of. So that's exciting.
I want to move to something that was in the headlines yesterday, and I think we talked about it this morning because you and I had our regular steering committee meeting with Greg DeRocher, is on masks. So I think it was whatever it does, Guelph, Wellington, Dufferin, where our neighbors to the west and northwest, anyways, they've mandated, their public health officer has mandated that in public settings, that face coverings are the direct, or what do they call it, the direction or the mandatory, if you will. Talk a little bit about and this is partly consistency for businesses who may operate in a couple of different places, but also as the province is opening up in a regional basis. So we're opening up. Toronto's not yet in some sectors. But the whole question of this type of issue, which I think is of importance to the business community broadly, and certainly here in Waterloo region, I maybe just kind of give a bit of a synopsis of that issue and why it's important.
Yeah, I think my felt sense is that, especially with the TTC announcement today that they're going to make masks mandatory starting in July. Look, there are very strong statistical signals, right, that have been sent over the last few months that wearing a mask, that individuals wearing masks can keep the R naught or the infection rate below 1, which is really important when you're kind of contemplating reopening. And a couple of data points, you can look at places like Japan and countries where wearing a mask is not a big kind of social stretch, that they've been able to really keep infections down. But an interesting recent data point, you might remember about 2.5 weeks ago, a hair salon in, I'm going to say Arizona, but it could have been Texas,
Sure.
could have been,
Yeah.
or could have been Detroit, or I can't remember. But they were concerned that 140 clients who had come in to get haircuts were exposed by 2 COVID-19 positive workers, right? So the quarantine period ended yesterday, or the day, actually 2 days ago. And of the 140 people, I believe 50 or 60 got tested, and there was not one positive case. And they're convinced that the reason is that there were mask protocols. Everyone had to wear a mask. And so when you've got two, think about, kind of a barber cutting your hair or styling your hair who's COVID positive, wearing a mask, you've got a mask, and if they were not able to pass on that infection, that's a very strong statistical signal that masks just work, right? It's beyond funky coincidence. So I think that that's something that we're, businesses and individuals are going to have to embrace. And the region of Waterloo is, probably considering the same type of protocol as Guelph. I mean, I'd be stunned if they weren't. But I think it's something I certainly can get behind, because if it means that we reopen more safely and we'll be able to do it without reverting back, then I'm like 100%. Let's do it. Let's brand these masks. Life is short. Wear a mask. Calm down. Wear a mask. Like whatever. Yours to discover. Wear a mask. Like who's behind? I think that it's something that look. We say in some facilities, no shoes, no shirt, no service. Why don't you add no mask, no service, right? I think that I think it's going to become and it should become standard. And now you need regulations to help promote it. But if you can't physically distance and you're not wearing a mask, we can't be friends. That's going to be my position. That's going to be my position here going forward, because there's too much at stake in the reopening.
It's sort of tied into the masks and Art. We've heard a lot in our chamber around, especially small and medium-sized business, saying, where do I get, even if when it's time for me to open, where do I get PPE like masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, shields, and we've got some great local stories, but that's one of the things that's been high on people's minds, Art, and we're lucky that through the Cambridge Chamber, there's an organization locally, but that's clearly one of the things that is, people are cautious about reopening if they don't think they've got the ability to get the PPE.
Yeah, I think that's just not a local problem, and that's a problem across Ontario, a problem across Canada. And speaking with other chambers of commerce and boards of trades across Canada and conference calls, I think everybody is doing something. Everybody is doing something to try to assist their members in this respect.
Yeah, and so that's something. Maybe just for Tony, Amanda and the gang at Catalyst 137 are trying to pull together what they're calling a cooperative, so that we can have bigger stockpiles of this, and small and medium-sized business will know that they can get if you only need 50 or 100, it's hard to source those quantities right now. So having this community initiative is going to be pretty important moving forward.
Yeah, and there's been a great uptake. I think Access PPE, which is the platform that Amanda has created, with warehousing at Catalyst 137, that's 137 Glasgow and Kitchener, 250 registered members, and over and above their public portal, which will serve healthcare providers. So think about hospitals and the LHINs and clinics. They're going to set up an online marketplace. So kind of you think about a kind of a Shopify for PPE, but what they're going to add, the value they're adding with this online marketplace for companies is they're actually going to underwrite it, and they're going to vet it. So that's really important. That is value added. It's not going to be this Wild West marketplace, which means that quality, pricing, preference will be given to local suppliers of PPE. It's a great thing that they've been able to stand up very quickly, and excited to be a part of that and to promote it as well. As other sources, there's a provincial portal as well as a federal portal, but actually know that the warehouse and the online portal and the marketplace are in kind of in the heart of Waterloo region and in its biggest city. That's exciting.
Because you're saying you're going to open up if you don't have enough hand sanitizer or gloves or things is it's not smart to do. You wouldn't want to do it. So, and those are some of the things that for those listening and those that will listen to this in the future are things that we're working on to make sure we get those. And maybe part of that, again, that new Axonify platform. Where do you get the types of PPE that you're required to have? So maybe I want to, one couple of times in our conversations, I thought it was very useful, just as we look back, maybe a little higher level. You've been around you're a little older than I am, but we're sort of contemporaries. You've been around, and I'm not saying that you're responsible for any of these things, but you've been around in your working career of 9/11 and SARS and the downturn in 2008, as have I, and now COVID. What are some of the things? I mean, we're in the middle of a crisis right now, but I mean, I always try and remain positive, saying we're working as hard as we can to help people through this. What are some of your takeaways of some of those other things that at the time you kind of said, how would we ever get past this? What would be some of your, I guess, giving people some positive reinforcement?
Well, I mean, it's having kind of, with a little bit of chronological maturity and having seen a few crises, it's hard not to be optimistic. And I say that because, I was on a trading desk during the Asian contagion, and in 1998, anybody putting money in Asia was considered crazy. Well, how long did that last? When the tech bubble burst in 2001, it was the end of e-commerce, right? And just think about Shopify today. And during the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009, the banks were never going to be the same, right? And they were never going to recover. And the auto industry was done. I was at the province right after as the assistant deputy minister during the auto restructuring during the financial crisis. Part of the oversight committee that started the Global Risk Institute that was focused on what financial institutions had to do to kind of beef up their capital ratios and manage risk. And here we are today, 3 months into an event, an exogenous shock that we haven't had in 100 years. And I guess what I would say is that there's a kind of myopia, like short-sightedness that can be a real challenge during these periods. Like, we were firing on all cylinders in February, and companies had all kinds of multi-year projections on revenues and kind of what their business would look like. Suddenly 3 months in, like they can't project past their elbows or like beyond 2 meters, right? And so what I would say is, I would say it's very, history teaches us that we get through these crises. We typically come out having learned a lot. Some of the productivity gains that companies are learning while they're doing this are going to be made permanent because they make a lot of sense. There's a reason why OpenText basically has shuttered half of their facilities, right? Because they figured, no, we don't need to do that. And so these are all things that we're learning in real time. And I would say that if countries like Japan can overcome an atomic bomb, 2 of them, and Germany can overcome the kind of the destruction of the Second World War through the economic miracle, right? That that we have to keep our eyes fixed on, the long-term goals of Waterloo region. We are going to have population growth. We're going to need to continue to recruit talent. We want to make sure that our startups can scale and be, are going to be successful. So we can't kind of lose sight of that. And I would say that that's what kind of it's not just blind hope, but it's based on my own experiences that that we will overcome this, and that we're gonna be a stronger, more resilient region as a result. And I think some of the stories, like there's all kinds of acts of heroism, personal, and if you think about all the frontline workers and what they're doing every single day, but stories of companies that have pivoted to from ed tech like Inksmith, education technology to making face shields, and companies like Eclipse Automation, I mentioned them before, but saying we don't need to rely on foreign supply of N95 masks. We should be able to manufacture our own in Canada, and they're not even spending a lot of time talking about it. They're just doing it. And so so I'm optimistic that that we have to, we're going to be stuck in this mud for a while, but let's not forget where the destination is. And the reality is, life moves in one direction only, and that's forward, right? So we can look back, hopefully learn a few things, but we're going to have to keep plowing ahead here.
Well, and I think that brings us back to where we started, which is what are we doing to support local business? Because people are still going to want to go out to restaurants. People are still going to need to buy things. It may be done differently, and maybe done in different quantities, more curbside pickup. But what we're trying to do as business economic support team and our organization is to make sure we help businesses get through this crisis to get to the other side, because the jobs are important and what it means for our community is really important. And that's why we're fixated on some of the bigger picture stuff, but also the how do we help on those government programs and giving the people the specific advice they need, because people need to get through this to get to the other side. And I don't know, it was you, someone this morning said, look, just remember at the end of every thunderstorm, usually the sun comes out, and that's what we have to be trying to hold on to right now. So those are helpful suggestions. And maybe I don't know that we got any more questions on the screen here.
We do have one question, Ian.
Okay, good.
Yep. First, a comment, great remark from Tony on the myopia that can set in. What do you think would be the priorities in the medium term after August, after this focus on reopening is over?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty straightforward. It's what's happening on Main Street. The have-nots in this digital divide, those companies that have to come up with creative ways to virtualize their business. Those that can't are going to have to figure out kind of what to do with their passion projects, their businesses, and their lives, right? And that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. I had a team meeting last week, and I was reminiscing on how challenging it was for me to leave a company called Digital Persona, which was a real passion project. Great management team, lots of fun. To go into a job at Largo Resources where I had to shave every day, go in downtown, as opposed to what I was doing before, because I'm a tech nerd at heart, kind of a propeller head trapped in a marketing guy's body, I think. But I remember how tough that was, and kind of needing a moment, when I talked to my board of directors and my CEO, just to say, look, I got to do something else. So imagine if that's your own bed and breakfast or your own restaurant. You've got you got a second mortgage on the house, and it is really a labor of love for a small business. There are some tough decisions that are going to have to be made. So when I think about kind of what's the priority, it's giving as much support as possible to individuals, families, and businesses that can't virtualize, and that you know, they're going to have to make some tough decisions, and we can't make it for these people. You know, God bless them. They're going to have to look in the mirror and say, it's time for me to either wind it up, learn how to code, do something else, or, you know, here's one way I can virtualize the business, and how do I take advantage of some of the platforms like the Digital Main Street Initiative. So I think that's got to be top priority, because that, you know, the other stuff, the supply chain kind of localization, getting back to trading and exporting and investing in the region, that, you know, that'll happen. That's already happening right now. I'm seeing it. So I'm just a little bit more concerned about, you know, Main Street.
Well, I think that the other part is innovation will produce things that we don't think of how does a retailer that has bricks and mortar be able to survive. And some of that we're already seeing is people are suddenly saying, well, I guess I better sell online and have a better combination. Our own organization, we can't do in-person events. You know, we're doing more of these. We have to get good at them and provide value for members and business and community. And I see that happening, and as you, it's really amazing to see the shift happening with some of these things. And I think that's the focus as to the questioner, kind of, you know, in the months ahead, and went through the summer, is we got to be what supports can we give to help people get there. And if they have to make the tough choice, we still have to find what are the jobs and what are the things that they can do to be contributing to the economy. Because if you're going to grow, you gotta there's got to be a place for everybody. And that's something I think we do generally, or at the bigger picture, have to be working towards. Yeah. We're just about out of time. I want to thank Tony. Now, maybe I think it's important for everyone to know there's lots of resources out there. There'll be more coming through what we've talked about with the Exonify platform, but there's great information. Tony, what's your, I forget what it is, I should know it, but your website has a whole bunch of materials. You've done some webinars around how to reopen, so there's some material. Yeah. Oh, there's it right there.
It's right behind me, right behind me. Okay. I forgot you were blind as a bat, but yeah, it is right behind me. And we are releasing a webinar next week on the reopening with, you know, kind of the veteran from my team going through a piece. I think it's going to be about 6 minutes, but you know, let's just make sure that we make it easy and kind of seamless for companies, especially because you know, tomorrow's an important day. It's kind of the beginning of phase 2 for Waterloo region, so you know, let's do whatever we can to make sure it's successful.
So now that I see that, I've looked in the right spot there. WaterlooEDC.ca. There's lots of information there. Go to our website, GKWChamber.com. There's all kinds of information, daily updates. We both do daily updates. The other plug for the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce is that if you're looking for PPE, Greg, to his credit, has stockpiled some, particularly and focused on small and medium-sized business. So if you've got needs right now to get up and running, they have on their website an ability to for small businesses to get small quantities of PPE and hand sanitizer, gloves, those sorts of things. So CambridgeChamber.com, CambridgeChamber.com, and the Best Waterloo is another resource as well. So there's lots of information. We're doing our best to try and put it all together so you don't have to go to very many places, but this is part of the, I would just finish by saying the cooperation, collaboration, innovation that the community is demonstrating is being reflected by the work that Communitech and their Waterloo EDC and the 2 chambers are doing to, and it's not just for members or your stakeholders, it's for everybody. This is a community. We all are all in this together, and the community needs to support one another to get through to the other side. So thank you very much. I know, Tony, your days are as full as anybody in the region, so thank you so much for breaking loose for an hour to be with us today. We will be sharing this with the attendees, but also be posting this on our website for others that didn't get to see it live. But great information. Thanks for joining us today, Tony.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and we're going to get this right and wear a mask.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you don't wear a mask, we can't be friends. I like that.
Yeah.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. All the best.